On a frozen island in the heart of the St. Lawrence River stands a castle that was never meant to feel empty. A European dream rising from American waters. Turrets, arches, grand halls, built not for royalty, but for love. Yet the story of Boldt Castle is not a fairy tale. It is a tragedy carved in limestone. At the dawn of the 20th century, George C. Boldt, one of America's greatest hotel magnates, began constructing a palace for the woman he adored. Hundreds of workers labored through brutal winters, shaping an island into a monument to devotion. But before the castle was complete, a single telegram ended everything. Construction stopped instantly. Tools were dropped. Fires in the workers' camps went cold. And Boldt Castle, the grandest private building on the river, was abandoned for more than 7 decades, left to storms, vandals, and silence. Today, millions visit the island each year, walking through a dream that death interrupted, a symbol of love, loss, and the strange immortality that unfinished places carry. This is not just the story of a castle. It is the story of a man who tried to build forever, only to learn that even forever can crumble. This is the tragic story of Boldt Castle. To understand why a hotel magnate would build a castle and then abandon it, you have to go back to 1864, to a dock in New York Harbor, to a 13-year-old boy stepping off a ship with no English, no money, and no family waiting. His name is George Charles Boldt, born April 25, 1851, on the island of Rügen in the Baltic Sea. Rügen is a place of chalk cliffs, pine forests, and old resort towns where wealthy Prussians take summer holidays. George grows up seeing grand hotels and seaside villas. He sees what leisure looks like for people with means. Then, his father dies. The family has no money. George's mother decides to send him to America, where an uncle supposedly lives in New York. She believes this uncle will take the boy in. The uncle does not exist. George arrives in Manhattan in 1864, 13 years old, and realizes he is alone. He speaks German. The city speaks English. He finds a job at a dockside hotel doing the lowest work available: busboy, dishwasher, trash carrier. He sleeps in a basement room. The pay is nearly nothing, but he watches. In kitchens and dining rooms, he learns something that most people miss. A hotel is not about the building. It is not about the menu. It is about the feeling a guest carries away. If someone feels seen, cared for, remembered, they return. And they tell others. By his early 20s, George has moved from busboy to kitchen manager. The work is brutal. 16-hour days, heat, grease, shouting. He tries to escape. In 1875, he goes to Texas, hoping to find opportunity. He returns to New York months later, poorer than when he left. Back in Manhattan, he takes another kitchen job. He keeps learning. Then in 1876, opportunity arrives in an unexpected form. William Carr, a respected club steward, needs someone to manage the dining room at the Philadelphia Club, the oldest and most exclusive gentlemen's club in America. The members are old money, quiet money. The kind of families that have held power for generations. They expect perfection, but they despise ostentation. George accepts the position. He moves to Philadelphia. And at the club, he meets William Carr's daughter. Her name is Louise Augusta Carr. She is 16 years old. She has grown up around hospitality, around tasteful design, around people who understand that elegance is about restraint, not display. With her father's approval, George begins courting her. On June 14, 1877, they marry. He is 26. She is 17. This is not a marriage of money. Louise brings no fortune. Her father is a steward, not a tycoon. What she brings is vision. What he brings is discipline. Together, they will build something neither could create alone. By 1881, George and Louise have saved enough to take a risk. They purchased the Bellevue Hotel at Broad and Walnut Streets in Philadelphia. It is more of a high-end restaurant than a true hotel, but it belongs to them. Louise immediately begins reimagining the space. Fresh flowers on every table, candles instead of harsh gas lamps, more distance between tables so conversations feel private, a sense that each guest matters. She understands something that most hotel operators of the era ignore. Wealthy women want public spaces where they can gather, host, and socialize outside their homes. Not back rooms, not side entrances, main dining rooms where they are treated as full patrons. The Bellevue becomes that place. George hires talented chefs and pays them well. The food is excellent. But people talk about Louise's touches. The feeling that this room was designed for them. Word spreads among Philadelphia's elite. Soon, the Bellevue is fully booked. There is even a story that the Boldts shipped Philadelphia terrapin soup to Queen Victoria. Whether true or embellished, the story illustrates how far their reputation has reached. In 1882, George buys the Stratford Hotel directly across the street. Now he controls both corners of a major intersection. Competition is eliminated. Traffic flows between the two properties. The Boldts are no longer struggling. They are a force. Powerful New Yorkers visiting Philadelphia begin making reservations at the Bellevue. One of them is Abner Bartlett, a real estate agent who works for William Waldorf Astor, heir to one of America's largest fortunes. Bartlett notices George's operational skill and Louise's design instincts. He mentions the couple to Astor. In 1891, William Waldorf Astor begins planning a new hotel on Fifth Avenue in New York. He wants it to be the grandest, most refined hotel in America. He needs the right person to run it. He offers the job to George Boldt. There is a complication. The Astor family is at war with itself. William Waldorf Astor and his cousin John Jacob Astor IV despise each other. Each owns adjacent properties on Fifth Avenue. Each plans to build a rival hotel. Both hire the same architect, Henry Janeway Hardenberg. Society drama is about to collide with skyline architecture. Despite the risk, George says yes. He will need to raise $100,000 just to furnish the building. He trusts Louise to create spaces that feel like private estates, not commercial lobbies. The Waldorf Hotel opens on March 13, 1893, in the middle of a national economic panic. Banks are failing. Businesses are closing. The stress nearly destroys George's health. But the Waldorf offers something rare during hard times: exclusive calm for those who can afford it. During crises, the wealthiest often spend more to demonstrate that they remain untouched. The Waldorf succeeds. Then in 1897, John Jacob Astor IV opens the Astoria Hotel next door. George does something few could accomplish. He convinces both feuding cousins to merge operations. A corridor joins the two buildings. The Waldorf Astoria is born, the largest hotel in the world, over 1,600 rooms. It becomes the address for presidents, industrialists, weddings, and deals. Everywhere, Louise's influence shows. Fresh flowers delivered daily, lighting that flatters faces. Rooms that feel welcoming, not institutional. She removes separate ladies' entrances. Women walk through the main doors, equal patrons. The hotel also pioneers ideas that become standard across the industry: room service, signature dishes created by Oscar Tschirky, known as Oscar of the Waldorf, and sauces that spread nationwide. By the late 1890s, George Boldt is earning one of the highest salaries in America. He also holds profitable leases on properties he manages. Estimates place his fortune between $15 million and $25 million, equivalent to hundreds of millions today. The Boldts live in suites at the Waldorf Astoria. They send their son, George Jr., to Cornell University and their daughter, Clover, to the Spence School. They have climbed from basement kitchens to the pinnacle of American society. Yet life inside a famous hotel is exhausting. You are always performing, always solving problems, always hosting. George remembers the quiet islands and castles of his childhood in Rügen. Louise wants a place that is private and theirs. They begin looking north. In the summer of 1895, the Boldts visit the Thousand Islands region along the St. Lawrence River. This is a stretch of water where more than 1,800 islands dot the border between the United States and Canada. Wealthy families from New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago have been buying islands and building summer cottages since the 1870s. Unlike Newport, Rhode Island, where society performs for itself on a public stage, the Thousand Islands offer privacy. Families can sail, fish, read, and rest without an audience. The river is wide. The islands are scattered. Your neighbors exist, but at a distance. The Boldts stay at a large resort hotel, but George wants something that does not require checking in at a front desk. They begin looking at islands for sale. Many are already taken. Then they hear about Hart Island, approximately 5 acres near Alexandria Bay. It holds a cottage built by Congressman Elijah Kirka Hart. The property has just changed hands, but within days, Louise purchases it herself. The recorded price is $1, likely a legal placeholder rather than the true cost. Once the papers are signed, George changes the spelling to Hart Island. He even reshapes the shoreline so that viewed from above it resembles a Valentine heart. The symbolism is deliberate. This will be a place for love, not status. They spend summers there, using the original cottage and gradually adding improvements. George also buys extensive land on nearby Wellesley Island, where he builds a working farm, a golf course, polo fields, stables, tennis courts, and guest cottages. He hosts with generosity, but Hart Island remains the most special place, smaller, closer, private. George Jr. and Clover swim, boat, and explore. Louise, who has spent 2 decades designing beautiful spaces for other people, finally has a place to design for herself. By 1899, the cottage feels inadequate. The Boldts do not want just more rooms. They want a true home where family can gather in comfort and guests can visit without the machinery of hospitality overwhelming the experience. Louise begins planning in detail. She wants good light. She wants rooms that flow naturally into one another. She wants spaces that feel grand, but not cold. George begins planning in scale. If they are going to build, they will build something permanent, something that will outlast them, something that can become a family seat for generations. They decide to construct a castle, not a replica, not a joke, a real castle designed by serious architects, built with the finest materials, constructed to the highest standards. This will be George's gift to Louise, delivered on Valentine's Day. The Boldts hire the Philadelphia architectural firm of Hewitt, Stevens, and Paste. George Paste, one of the partners, takes the lead on the design. The firm has experience with large residential projects, but this will be their most ambitious. The style they choose is Rhineland Castle Revival. The reference point is clear. The castles George saw as a boy on Rügen and along the Baltic coast. Towers, turrets, stone walls, Gothic arches, romance made solid. But this is not fantasy architecture. The building must function as a modern residence. It must have plumbing, electricity, heating, and all the infrastructure required for year-round comfort. The challenge is to hide 20th century machinery inside a 19th century aesthetic. Plans call for a 6-story structure with 120 rooms, approximately 44,000 square feet of interior space, and a footprint covering most of the island. There will be a grand entrance hall, a library, a ballroom, a billiard room, multiple parlors, bedrooms for family and guests, and service quarters for staff. The building will be constructed from pink gray granite quarried on nearby Oak Island. The stone is hard, durable, and beautiful. Each block must be cut by hand, shaped to fit, and transported by barge. Ground breaks in July 1900. The work requires infrastructure before construction can even begin. A powerhouse must be built to generate electricity for the island. A water system must be installed, drawing from the river and purifying it for use. Docks must be reinforced to handle heavy barges. Storage sheds must be erected for materials and tools. By autumn, the foundations are complete. Stonework begins in earnest. Teams of masons work from dawn until dusk, laying course after course. The walls rise slowly, precisely, each stone fitted into place. The workforce grows to approximately 300 men at peak. Italian stonemasons, Scottish carpenters, Irish laborers, German craftsmen. They come from across the Northeast and from Europe, drawn by steady wages and the scale of the project. The work pauses each winter when masonry work becomes impossible. Ice covers the river. Temperatures drop below zero. The men leave, returning in spring when the ice breaks. Spring 1901, work resumes. The towers take shape. The roof structure begins. Interior framing starts, plaster walls, electrical conduits, plumbing lines. Everything must be coordinated, sequenced, installed in the correct order. George visits regularly, checking progress, making decisions, approving materials. Louise comes less often. Her health, never robust, is declining. She suffers from what doctors vaguely call heart trouble. She tires easily. She rests more. But she continues to plan. She selects wallpaper. She chooses fixtures. She imagines how light will fall through windows, how guests will move through rooms, how the castle will feel when it is alive with family. By 1902, the exterior is largely complete. The granite walls stand solid. The towers are capped. The windows are glazed. From the river, the castle looks finished. Inside, it is still a skeleton. Walls need plaster. Floors need finishing. Woodwork needs installation. Painting, tiling, decorating, furnishing, all of it remains. The target completion date is February 14th, 1904, Valentine's Day. George wants to present the castle to Louise on that date, exactly as promised, but Louise's health worsens. By late 1903, she is spending most of her time in the Waldorf Astoria suite, too weak to travel. Doctors offer treatments, but none of them work. George pushes the construction crews, faster, better. The deadline must be met, January 1904. Louise is bedridden. Her heart is failing. George sits beside her, watching her fade. On January 7th, 1904, she dies. The telegram arrives on Hart Island the same afternoon. Stop all construction immediately. The foremen gather the workers. They explain. The men understand. They set down their tools, collect their belongings, and leave. By evening, the island is deserted. George never returns. He cannot. Every stone was cut for her. Every arch was shaped to frame her presence. The castle was never meant to be his. It was meant to be hers. Without her, it is unbearable. The unfinished castle stands empty. Winter winds blow through open doorways. Snow drifts into rooms where floors remain unfinished. Ice forms on windows that were never meant to face winter unprotected. Spring comes. The ice breaks. Tourists passing on steamers see the towers and wonder. Some guides begin telling the story. A man built a castle for his wife, and she died before it was finished. Summers pass. The castle weathers. Vandals break in. Windows are smashed. Fixtures are stolen. Graffiti appears on walls. The island becomes a curiosity, then a ruin, then a cautionary tale about love and loss. George Boldt continues managing the Waldorf Astoria. He throws himself into work. He never remarries. He never speaks publicly about Hart Island. When asked, he redirects the conversation. In 1916, George Jr. dies unexpectedly at age 39. The loss devastates George. He loses his son, and with him, any hope that the castle might someday serve a future generation. George Charles Boldt dies on December 5, 1916, at age 65. He is buried beside Louise in Brooklyn. The castle is mentioned in his will, but not as a completed project. It is listed as real estate, property to be disposed of by his executors. Hart Island passes through various owners. None complete the construction. The castle remains frozen at the moment work stopped, a monument to a grief so profound it halted 300 men in their tracks. For decades, the castle decays. The Thousand Islands continue to attract tourists, but Hart Island is mostly avoided. The story is too sad. The ruins are too stark. Then, in 1977, something changes. The Thousand Islands Bridge Authority acquires Hart Island in 1977. They face a choice: demolish the ruin or attempt restoration. They choose restoration. The decision is not purely sentimental. The castle, even in ruins, is architecturally significant. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The location is spectacular. If restored and open to the public, it could become a major tourist attraction. But the scale of the work is staggering. The building has been exposed to weather for 73 years. Granite walls have cracked. Interior plaster has collapsed. Wooden beams have rotted. Electrical and plumbing systems are obsolete. Everything must be assessed, stabilized, and either repaired or replaced. The Bridge Authority commits to a phased restoration. Work begins in 1977 and continues for decades. Stonemasons are brought in to repair granite walls. Carpenters rebuild rotted structures. Electricians install modern systems while preserving historic appearances. Plumbers replace rusted pipes. The goal is not to complete George Boldt's vision. That would be impossible. The original plans are incomplete. Louise's specific wishes are lost. Instead, the goal is to stabilize the structure, make it safe for visitors, and present it as a historic site that tells a story about ambition, love, and loss. By the 1980s, the castle is stable enough to open for tours. Visitors arrive by ferry from Alexandria Bay. They walk through rooms that were never finished. They see walls with partial plaster, spaces that were meant to be ballrooms, but remain empty shells, towers that lead nowhere. The story becomes famous. Boldt Castle, the unfinished castle built for love. Guidebooks repeat the narrative. A hotel magnate builds a castle for his wife. She dies. He never returns. Construction stops forever. It is romantic. It is tragic. It is simple. But simple stories are rarely complete stories. Stand in the entrance hall of Boldt Castle today, and you see granite walls rising toward vaulted ceilings. You see carved stone, leaded glass, mahogany trim. Beautiful, undeniably beautiful. Now step outside and look at the island itself, 5 acres. Every square foot was reshaped, graded, landscaped. Retaining walls were built, gardens were planted, paths were laid, docks were constructed. This was not a cottage project. This was an industrial operation. The powerhouse alone required specialized equipment, skilled engineers, and enough generating capacity to run an entire small town. The building still stands on the island's south shore, a utilitarian brick structure that contrasts sharply with the castle's romance. The water system drew from the river, filtered through mechanical systems, and distributed through hundreds of feet of pipe. Sewage had to be handled. Waste had to be removed. Heating such a massive stone structure required boilers, coal storage, and distribution networks running beneath floors and inside walls. In winter, keeping the castle warm would have consumed tons of coal daily. The workforce during peak construction reached approximately 300 men. They needed housing, food, and supervision. Barges ran constantly, bringing materials from the mainland, stone from Oak Island, lumber from regional mills, glass from specialty manufacturers, fixtures from importers. The operation cost tens of thousands of dollars monthly at a time when the average American worker earned less than $500 per year. Who were these workers? Records are incomplete, but names survive in payroll ledgers and local newspapers. Italian stonemasons from quarry families, Scottish carpenters trained in Old World methods, Irish laborers who came for steady wages, German craftsmen brought over for specialized work. Their names: Domenico Russo, master mason, 42, from Carrara; James Whitfield, lead carpenter, 51, trained in Edinburgh. Names that appear in records, then disappear. And then there is Liam Brennan. Liam Brennan was 23 years old, a general laborer from the Bronx. He came to the Thousand Islands in the summer of 1900 looking for work. He was hired onto the Boldt Castle project doing basic tasks, moving materials, digging, foundations, hauling stone. On August 14, 1900, a barge carrying stone from Oak Island to Hart Island overturned in rough water. 3 men were thrown into the river, 2 were pulled out. Liam Brennan drowned. His body was recovered 3 days later. No family was found. He was buried at public expense in a local cemetery. The work on the castle continued without pause. This is the hidden cost. Not the financial cost, though that was immense. The human cost. How many men were injured? How many suffered crushed fingers, broken bones, lung damage from stone dust? Records do not say. Victorian-era construction projects rarely documented worker injuries unless they resulted in death. How many families went months without seeing fathers, sons, brothers? How many children grew up in tenement apartments while their fathers lived in temporary housing near Alexandria Bay? The castle was built on their backs. Their skill shaped the stone. Their sweat soaked into the mortar. Their blood, in at least one documented case, soaked into the river. And when Louise died, they were dismissed, not because the work was complete, because the reason for the work had vanished. George Boldt's grief is understandable, profound, real, but 300 men lost their livelihoods in a single afternoon because one man's heart broke. That is also real. Boldt Castle was not the only structure built on Hart Island. George's vision extended across the entire property. The Ulster Tower, a stone structure on the northern point of the island, was designed as a children's playhouse for Clover. It is a miniature castle, complete with turrets, battlements, and rooms scaled for a child's imagination. Built from the same granite as the main castle, it stands fully completed, because work on it finished before Louise's death. The powerhouse, as mentioned, supplied electricity for the entire island. It is a functional building, utilitarian in design, but constructed with the same attention to quality as the castle itself. It still stands, a reminder that beauty requires infrastructure. The Italian gardens were planned for the island's western slope. Terraces would descend toward the river, planted with formal gardens, fountains, and sculptures. Some grading was completed, but the gardens were never planted. On nearby Wellesley Island, George built an entire estate infrastructure. A working farm provided fresh produce, milk, and eggs. Stables housed horses for riding and polo. A golf course offered recreation. Tennis courts, boathouses, and guest cottages spread across hundreds of acres. All of this required staff, farmers, grooms, groundskeepers, cooks, maids, gardeners. The operation employed well over 100 people during summer months. Monthly costs ran into tens of thousands of dollars. The farm alone required continuous investment, livestock, equipment, seed, labor. The golf course needed maintenance. The stables needed feed and veterinary care. George could afford it. His income from the Waldorf Astoria and other properties was substantial, but the scale of the operation reveals something important. This was never just a vacation home. This was an estate designed to function as a self-sufficient domain, a family seat that could sustain itself across generations. Louise's death did not just stop construction on a castle. It collapsed an entire vision of family legacy. George Jr. might have inherited it. He might have completed the castle, married, raised children on the island. The Boldt name might have become synonymous with the Thousand Islands, the way the Vanderbilt name became synonymous with Biltmore. But George Jr. died young. Clover married, but did not inherit the island. The estate fragmented. The vision died. What remains today is a fragment of a fragment. The Ulster Tower, the powerhouse, the incomplete castle, a few outbuildings. Everything else has been sold, demolished, or absorbed back into the landscape. And the question lingers. Was this always inevitable? Is there a way to build permanence, or does every human structure eventually crumble? Boldt Castle belongs to a specific moment in American history, the Gilded Age, roughly 1870 to 1910. This is the era when industrial wealth concentrates in the hands of a small number of families: Vanderbilts, Astors, Carnegies, Rockefellers, men who control steel, oil, railroads, banking. These men build monuments, not churches, not public institutions, private homes designed to rival European palaces. The Breakers in Newport, Biltmore in North Carolina, Whitehall in Florida. These estates employ hundreds. They cost millions. They consume resources at a scale that would be shocking even to modern sensibilities. George Boldt is not quite at that level. He is wealthy, but his fortune comes from labor, not from monopoly. He worked his way up. He earned his position. But by the time he builds Boldt Castle, he has absorbed the same logic. If you can afford grandeur, you build grandeur. The logic contains a paradox. You build to demonstrate permanence. Stone lasts. Castles endure. Your name will be remembered because your building cannot be erased. But permanence requires maintenance. It requires wealth that keeps flowing. It requires heirs who care. It requires a society that values what you built. Change any of those variables and the monument crumbles. The Breaker survives because it becomes a museum. Biltmore survives because it becomes a tourist attraction. Whitehall survives because it becomes a museum. Boldt Castle survives because it becomes a museum. But survival as a museum is not the same as survival as a home. Museums preserve. They do not inhabit. The life drains out. The building becomes a stage set, a place where tourists walk through and imagine what it might have been like to live with such wealth. And what tourists rarely imagine is the labor, the workers who built it, the staff who maintained it, the people whose names do not appear in guidebooks: Domenico Russo, James Whitfield, Liam Brennan. Their labor made the castle possible. Their skill shaped the stone. Their lives were spent in service to someone else's dream. And when the dream ended, they were dismissed. No compensation for incomplete work, no acknowledgement of their contribution. They became invisible again, the way labor has always been invisible to those who employ it. This is the Gilded Age paradox. Beauty built on exploitation. Monuments built on bones. We admire the beauty. We should. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The architecture is stunning. The vision is bold. But we must also see the cost, not just the financial cost, the human cost. The popular story of Boldt Castle is simple. A man loved his wife. He built her a castle. She died. He never returned. Tragic, romantic, unforgettable. The reality is more complex. George Boldt did love Louise. The evidence is overwhelming. He credited her with his success. He trusted her judgment. He built Hart Island as a gift for her. When she died, his grief was profound. But the castle was also a statement. It said, "I have arrived. I have wealth. I have taste. I belong among the elite families who summer in the Thousand Islands." George was always an outsider, born in Prussia, not America, started as a busboy, not an heir, worked in kitchens, not counting houses. Even after he became wealthy, even after he managed the Waldorf Astoria, even after society figures deferred to his expertise, he remained, in some fundamental way, the immigrant boy who arrived with nothing. The castle was a way to claim belonging, to build something that could not be dismissed, to create a family seat that would endure. Louise's death destroyed that possibility. Without her, the castle lost its meaning, not because George stopped loving her, because the entire structure of the dream collapsed. Family legacy requires family. George Jr. dies. Clover moves away. There is no third generation waiting to inherit. The castle becomes pointless. George could have completed it anyway. He could have hired new workers, pushed through the grief, finished the construction, and opened it as a summer residence. He had the money. He had the time. He chose not to. That choice reveals something important. The castle was never really about the building. It was about Louise, about marriage, about partnership. Without her, the stone was just stone. And perhaps that is the most honest thing George Boldt ever did. He refused to pretend. He refused to inhabit a monument to a life that no longer existed. He walked away. It was a kind of integrity, a refusal to fake permanence, but it was also a kind of abandonment. 300 workers had given years of their lives to the project. Suppliers had extended credit. Communities had grown around the construction. And in one telegram, it all ended. The popular myth focuses on George's grief. That grief is real, but the myth ignores everyone else's loss. The workers who lost income, the families who lost stability, the craftsmen who lost the chance to complete a masterpiece. Their stories do not fit the romantic narrative, so they disappear. But they were there, and their absence from the story is itself a story. When the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority took control of Hart Island in 1977, they faced a philosophical question: what should be restored? The castle as George intended it, completed and furnished? That would require inventing Louise's vision, since her specific plans are lost. The castle as it stood in 1904, unfinished and raw? That would leave it structurally unsound and inaccessible. The castle as a compromise, stabilized and safe but clearly incomplete? That is the path they chose. The restoration work has been ongoing for more than 40 years. Millions of dollars have been invested. Skilled craftsmen have repaired granite walls, rebuilt roofs, and installed modern infrastructure. But the goal has never been to complete George's vision. The goal has been to preserve the building as a historical site that tells a story. Walk through the castle today, and you see that story in every room. Finished spaces next to unfinished shells, restored plasterwork beside exposed brick, completed towers above incomplete wings. The building is a kind of archaeological site, layers of intention and abandonment visible simultaneously. Some visitors find this frustrating. They want to see what the castle would have looked like if finished. They want the fairy tale completed. But the incomplete state is the truth. And perhaps it is a more honest monument than a completed version ever could have been. The castle, as it stands, is a memorial to impermanence, to the fact that human plans do not always survive human lifespans, to the reality that beauty requires not just money and labor, but also purpose. Without purpose, even castles crumble. The restoration has also created jobs: stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, guides, ferry operators, groundskeepers. The island employs dozens of people year-round and hundreds more during summer months. These workers are the direct descendants, economically, if not literally, of the 300 men who built the castle originally. Their labor continues to shape the island. Their skill maintains what remains. But now they are acknowledged. Their work is visible. When you take a tour, guides talk about the restoration effort. They explain the challenges. They describe the craftsmanship required to repair century-old stonework. The workers are no longer invisible. That is progress, small perhaps, but real. Every summer, tens of thousands of tourists visit Boldt Castle. They board ferries in Alexandria Bay, cross the river, and step onto Hart Island. They walk through the castle, taking photographs, reading plaques, imagining what life might have been like. What do they see? Some see romance, the ultimate love story, rendered in stone. A man who loved his wife so much that he built her a castle and could not bear to complete it after she died. Some see tragedy, the waste of it, the potential unfulfilled, the beautiful building that never became a home. Some see history, a window into the Gilded Age, when wealth could build monuments, when craftsmanship still mattered, when families still thought in terms of generational legacy. Some see spectacle, a castle in America, towers and turrets, a fairy tale made real, even if incomplete. What do they miss? They miss Domenico Russo, shaping stone in the summer heat. They miss James Whitfield, measuring timber in the carpentry shed. They miss Liam Brennan, drowning in the river because a barge overturned. They miss the 300 workers who built the castle and were dismissed in a single day. They miss the complexity of George Boldt's decision. The grief, yes, but also the privilege, the ability to walk away from millions of dollars of construction, because the emotional reason for building disappeared. Most people cannot walk away. Most people finish the job whether they want to or not, because they need the paycheck. George Boldt could walk away. That is what wealth allows. The choice to stop. The tourists also miss the ongoing labor. The restoration workers who arrive each morning, who repair and maintain and preserve. The guides who tell the story hundreds of times each summer. The ferry operators who transport visitors back and forth. These workers are visible, but in the way that service workers are always visible. Present but not central. Necessary but not celebrated. The castle is the star. The story is the attraction. But the story only exists because people keep telling it, and the building only stands because people keep repairing it. Without labor, the castle returns to ruin. That has always been true. It will always be true. What does Boldt Castle teach us? Some lessons are obvious. Love matters. Loss is real. Grief can be overwhelming. But there are deeper lessons, harder lessons. Lessons that require standing in the entrance hall and asking uncomfortable questions. Lesson 1. Beauty requires labor. The granite walls did not rise by themselves. The towers did not shape themselves. Every element of the castle required human hands, human skill, human effort. The beauty we admire exists because workers made it exist. We can celebrate craftsmanship without celebrating exploitation. But we cannot celebrate craftsmanship while ignoring the conditions under which that craft was practiced. Victorian-era construction was dangerous. Workers had few protections. Injuries were common. Deaths were unremarkable. Liam Brennan drowned because safety standards were inadequate. He is buried in a cemetery with no family to visit his grave. His death is a footnote in the castle's history. That is a failure. A failure to value the lives of working people as much as we value the structures they build. Lesson 2. Permanence is an illusion. George Boldt built in granite because granite lasts. He wanted something that would endure across generations. He wanted his name to be remembered. And it is. Boldt Castle is famous. Tourists come from around the world to see it. But they do not visit a home. They visit a ruin, partially restored, turned into a museum. The building survives, but the life it was meant to contain is gone. All monuments eventually become museums or rubble. Human institutions do not last. Families do not last. Buildings require maintenance, and maintenance requires wealth and will. Change either variable, and the monument crumbles. Lesson 3. Grief is a privilege. George Boldt's grief was real. His decision to stop construction was understandable. No one should be forced to continue building a monument to a lost partner if the emotional cost is too high. But grief is not equally available to everyone. George could afford to grieve. He could afford to walk away. He had enough wealth that abandoning millions of dollars of construction did not threaten his survival. The 300 workers he dismissed did not have that luxury. They needed to find new jobs immediately. They had families depending on them. They could not afford to stop working because they were sad. Grief, like most things, is shaped by class. The wealthy grieve in castles. Workers grieve in tenements, while still showing up for the next shift. Lesson 4. History belongs to those who can afford to build. We know George Boldt's name. We know Louise's name. We know the architects' names. We do not know most of the workers' names. History preserves what the powerful consider important: buildings, fortunes, social connections, the stories of the wealthy. Labor is invisible until someone chooses to make it visible. This script is an attempt to make it visible, to say Domenico Russo was here, James Whitfield was here, Liam Brennan was here. They mattered. Their work mattered. Their lives mattered. They built the castle. George Boldt paid for it, but they built it. Without them, there is no story. Stand on Hart Island at dusk. The ferry has stopped running. The tourists have left. The island is quiet. The castle rises against the sky, granite walls catching the last light. The towers stand empty. The windows are dark. The rooms echo. Is there still a heart here? The island was renamed for love. George reshaped the shoreline to form a valentine. Every stone was cut for Louise. Every arch was designed to frame her presence. When she died, the heart stopped beating. But perhaps there is another heart. Not George's, not Louise's, the heart of the workers who built it. Their labor is embedded in every wall. Their skill is visible in every carved stone. Their sweat is mixed into the mortar. Buildings outlive builders, but buildings carry the builders forward. When you walk through Boldt Castle, you are walking through the work of 300 men whose names are mostly forgotten, but their hands shaped what you see. Their expertise created the beauty you admire. That is a kind of immortality, not the kind George Boldt wanted, where his name would be remembered across generations. A different kind, quieter, more honest. The workers did not build for legacy, they built for wages. But the work remains, and the work is excellent. That excellence is its own statement. It says, we were here, we mattered, we built this. And when tourists walk through the castle today, marveling at the craftsmanship, they are, in a sense, validating that statement. They are saying, yes, this matters, this is beautiful, this is worth preserving. The tourists may not know the workers' names, but they honor the work. That is not enough. Names matter, stories matter, recognition matters, but it is something. And perhaps, in time, as more people ask, who built this, instead of just, who paid for this, the workers will be remembered more fully. Domenico Russo, James Whitfield, Liam Brennan, say their names. They built the castle. On a cold day in January 1904, Louise Boldt died at age 42. Within hours, a telegram stopped construction on a castle that was meant to be a gift for her. 300 workers left the island. George Boldt never returned. The castle stood unfinished for 73 years, weathering storms, enduring vandalism, slowly crumbling. Then, in 1977, restoration began, not to complete George's vision, but to preserve what remained, to tell a story about love, loss, ambition, and impermanence. Today, Boldt Castle is one of the most visited tourist sites in the Thousand Islands. Tens of thousands of people tour it every summer. They take photographs. They buy souvenirs. They tell friends, you have to see this place. What they see is beautiful. What they miss is the cost. Beauty always costs. It costs labor. It costs time. It costs resources. Sometimes it costs lives. We can admire beauty while acknowledging the cost. We can celebrate craftsmanship while honoring the craftsman. We can tell love stories while telling labor stories. Boldt Castle is both. It is a monument to a love so profound that its loss stopped 300 men mid-task. It is also a monument to the 300 men who did the task, who shaped the stone, who cut the timber, who poured the concrete, who made the dream real. Both stories are true, both stories matter. Stand on Hart Island and ask yourself, whose heart still beats here? George's, in the act of building for love? Louise's, in the dream of a home, or the workers in every stone they touched? The answer is all of them. The castle is a collective heart. It beats with the labor of forgotten hands. It beats with the grief of a man who lost his partner. It beats with the vision of a woman who wanted beauty in her life. And it beats with the tourists who arrive each summer, who walk through the rooms, who feel something when they see the unfinished walls. That feeling is the heart still beating, imperfect, incomplete, but alive. That is the lesson. Not that love conquers all. Not that money buys permanence. Not that grief justifies abandonment. The lesson is simpler and harder. Beauty requires labor. Permanence is illusion. Grief is privilege. History belongs to those who can afford to build. But the workers were here, and their work remains. Remember them.